One of the things that Parks Canada does here is to bring stories to life through the national treasures that we are entrusted to protect. The HMCS Haida is a perfect example of how Parks Canada strives to connect Canadians to these stories. You can't replace first-hand accounts of those who actually experience these nation-defining events. And so, ladies and gentlemen, it's with great honor and privilege I invite Mr. Ralph Frayne, an original crew member of the HMCS Haida and a veteran from the Second World War who served on D-Day, to share a few words with us.
Now, isn't this a hell of a good day? Now, I wrote out my speech. My wife, who is the nicest thing about me, is up front here. But she told me I had to stick to the speech because it was decent. And I'm not going to really do that. You may hear things that your 3-year-old daughter hasn't heard before. I will try to stay with my speech, though. It's a great honor for me to be asked to speak to you on this special day, June 6, 2014, about my experiences in World War II on the ship, the Haida. I was one of many Canadians who participated in the war, each one of whom was both expendable and necessary. I'm talking too loud again. Okay, there's no doubt about it. Canada did one hell of a job, and I get emotional. I'm sorry, I do get emotional. But Canada in the war did one hell of a good job. The recruits came from everywhere. They came without hesitation, and they did their doggonedest. Anyway, going back to my speech, I was given a word of advice by a World War I veteran. That was when I was in the Army. My wife is looking at me. And that was, I was to eat everything I gave me, sleep every chance I got, and always look busy. So I had the Army, the Norwegian Merchant Navy, and the Canadian Navy. Throughout all of these expeditions, I tried to follow that advice. I didn't spend too much time in the brig. I did spend time in the brig, I don't deny that. But back to the Merchant Navy for a moment. We weren't prepared for war. Canada was not a warring nation. There was no armament on the Merchant Navy except a telephone on the foredeck made to look like a large gun. It set up there, it was supposed to scare German submarines away. There's a great big gun sitting up there, a telephone pole. On my last convoy from Newfoundland, we would meet in Newfoundland to convoy. This was when I was in the Merchant Navy. We steamed through a group of survivors from a previous ship that had been hit, but we were prohibited from slowing down to assist them. That was when I decided, back in Canada, I was joining the Navy, which I did when I returned. 2 years later, after I joined, I was drafted to the Haida. Now, that wasn't 2 years doing nothing. I had quite a life during that time. I took special training as a commando. I'm getting emotional again. I took special training as a commando in Scotland, and I learned how to kill a man in 30 seconds. It was a rather simple matter once you knew how to do it. Somehow, I didn't fulfill their final requirements. I think they must have realized I was still pretty young. And I was then sent back to the regular Navy. Now, I'm going to digress again for a moment. Again, I had some fun. We had an officer we were at Niobe in Scotland, and we had an officer who believed that anybody who took this commando training had to be crazy. I think maybe we might have been, but in any case, they kept putting us on continually on the dirtiest jobs you could find. One of which was as a security, way up in a bush, like you were up on an escarpment. And he made a point of making sure I got up there. There was nobody there, nobody came, nothing. Well, one night I decided I was going to try to bring this to an end. So I took my post, I stayed there, I emptied my gun, I cleaned it out, and I waited. And he comes sneaking up on me as he had done in the past. I waited till he was about 8 feet away from me, and then I rammed the chamber shut in the rifle, and he could hear it. And I didn't say a word. He stood there, he did nothing. Then I heard a very, very quiet voice say, "Frayne, it's so-and-so." I said, "Advance and be recognized." But after that, I didn't spend any more time on guard duty. I never had to go back on that. So this was one of my I thought, humorous things. Then 2 years later, I was drafted to the Haida. That to me was the best news I had. The Haida was a new type of destroyer, commissioned August 30th, 43. She was one of 27 tribal destroyers, of which 13 were lost in action. Many of those that were lost were British destroyers. Whenever there was a real problem, they sent in a tribal class destroyer. Tribal class, we were named after Indian tribes. The Haida, named after the Haida tribe in British Columbia. As far as I know, I am possibly, and I think I am, the sole surviving member of the commissioning crew, the original commissioning crew. And perhaps that was because I was still underage at that time. The average man on the ship at that time would probably be about 93 or 94 today. I wasn't anywhere near that, and I'm not quite near that yet. The Haida had 3 4.7 turrets, 2 forward and 1 aft, and a 5-inch gun firing every 5 seconds when you were in action. That's how fast we could pour the shells out. Incidentally, I'm deaf as a result of it. She would do 34 knots in action and never turn from battle. We ran the threat of shore batteries from France when we sunk, or we had a damaged German destroyer. We hit 2 of them, and we had sunk one, and we drove the other one ashore. It was badly damaged, and we could see the, we couldn't go after her because the shore batteries could outreach us with their shells. Included in the service was 2 trips to Russia. I once spent a very traumatic Christmas in Russia, and I saw scenes that I will never forget. Russia was a different country. Russia was fighting for its life, and they were serious, very serious about their position. Now, one of the scenes that I saw there, we gathered up all our medical paraphernalia on the ship, everything that was medical. We gathered it up, and I was one of the 6 crew members to carry those medical benefits into the hospital at Kola Bay, Russia. When we come out of the hospital, we saw a pile of dead bodies just piled up. The reason they were piled was the ground was too hard frozen to bury them yet. They would keep them over the winter and then bury them in the spring. That hit me. As I said, I will get emotional. Anyway, going back then, if I read my speech, I maybe won't do that. The Haida had a credit for 13 or 14 sinkings, which included a submarine on June 17th after D-Day landings were made. Now, you wonder why I say 13 or 14. Our skipper, seamen are very, very superstitious. They'll work out all kinds of theories based on superstition. Our captain was no different. He was superstitious. He would never acknowledge the 13th ship being sunk. And he used to cut a groove in the bow and on the bridge of the ships he cut. There was a blank. There were 14 cuts. I correct myself. There were 13 cuts because there was a gap between 12 and 14. Have I got it right? Thank you. Okay. We sunk a troop ship, the Haida did, in which there were 800 German soldiers on it. Now, you may be familiar with France a little bit. Brest was a very heavily fortified city, and the Allies, instead of trying to capture Brest from the sea, simply surrounded it and cut it off from the rest of the country. As a result, many of the Germans tried to escape from Brest by sea. So that was how we hit this ship with the 800 Special Task Force Germans on it. We understand there was 91 rescued, 36 bodies washed up on shore. Now, I've been asked, didn't I feel bad about that many dying? I'm not going to say anything because I'm afraid I'd swear. I did not feel bad at all. All I could think of, how many Canadians did we save as a result? I did my little tiny bit on the ship, and I enjoyed it very, very much. We got along. We had fun on the ship. I don't know. Did I tell you about the man who bought the ladies' panties? My wife shakes her head. All right. Anything that could make a laugh on the ship was worth it. Otherwise, you would go nuts. One of our guys, the bridge boy, bought this pair of ladies' panties, and he wore them around his neck in place of a scarf all the time. Now, he went further. That gag, no, my wife is shaking her head. Oh, she doesn't want me to tell the rest of that story. Anybody wants to hear the rest of the story afterwards, I'll tell you. On my service, I was really suffering very bad shell shock. I was a pits. I couldn't lift a cup of coffee. I had to be helped to move around. I just I was done. I got over it. I got mad at myself and said, this is nonsense. Get going. So I can say now that today I am very proud. I am proud of our country. I am proud of the services we rendered, the opportunities we make available to the young and to the newcomers. And I'm glad to see newcomers if they're proud to be Canadians in the future. I think I'm going to end it at that time. I think my wife is nodding for Okay, that's it. Now, if I am going to be here, if there is anybody has any questions they want to ask afterwards, I would be very glad to answer them. If there's anybody got a big immediate question, shove your hand in the air. Nobody. There's one. Oh, I first joined the service at 14. I decided it was time to get into it. War was declared. I joined immediately. I went to the Lawrence Scots PD&H regiment. That was a Hamilton regiment. And I served there. They dismissed me when they found out my age. I then went in the Merchant Navy and served in the Norwegian Merchant Navy. Then from the Merchant Navy, after I'd seen that group of survivors in the water, I joined the Canadian Navy. That was all I did.
What did you do with your gratuity?
What did I do with my gratuities?
From the war? You went back to school.
I'm sorry?
You went back to school after the war.
Oh, I'm not sure what my wife is talking about. After the war, I worked first in a lumber yard. Now, if anybody's working in a lumber yard, they know what the hell that is. That was worse than the war. After 4 months in the lumber yard, every night I'd go home and pull splinters out of my hands. I decided this is crazy, and I then got a hold of DVA, Department of Veterans Affairs, and I went back to school. In school, I had only grade 10. I finished high school in 3 months to get my full graduation. Then I went to university, and I took 3 years university in 2 years. I was bent to get somewhere, and then I became a lawyer. I've been a lawyer ever since. I'm still practicing law, and I'm very, very proud to say, as late as about 6 months ago, I received a special award from the Law Society for the services that I had performed for the public. Ladies and gentlemen, that's it.